Welcome to Travel Massive Live. I'm Kevin O'Shaughnessy from CityHook and the Dublin Travel Massive team. Today we're talking about airline innovation, and we have a very special guest. One of our supporters here at Travel Massive is Singapore Airlines. We're having their Vice President of Digital Innovation, Jerome Thil, join us in just a moment about his own journey as an innovator and what they're doing in Singapore Airlines, as well as talking a little bit about this thing called the AppChallenge that they're working with a number of startups around the world on. So we'll be talking about that, airline innovation, and Jerome himself in just a second. If you'd like to join the conversation or to pose a question and make them a good one, pose a good question to Jerome. We'll put it on air. Hit us up at live@travelmassive.com. The chat window underneath where you're watching, if you're watching on YouTube or on travelmassive.com directly, that'll come to Maria here backstage and she'll feed all the best questions to me. But please engage. If you're watching us live, get the questions in, and I hope you get the most out of it if you're watching us on a replay. Now, Jerome has an interesting history. Before I bring you on there, Jerome, he has an interesting history. He's one of the few people I know that's actually worked for all of the three big global distribution systems companies like Amadeus, Sabre, and Travelport. So, Jerome, I thought that makes for a very interesting background. I know I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about that when you're on, but maybe we could get you on here to have a quick chat about your own journey. What brought you into travel in the first place? What got the bug?
Kevin. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Yes, it sounds a bit like I'm the mercenary of the gang, right? I've been with the three competitors there. It doesn't sound really good, but it wasn't meant to be like that, to be really honest. When I started my journey as a young engineer in France. I'm French, originally from east of France, Strasbourg, a lovely city. Really invite you to go there as soon as the borders let us go through again. Look, I started my first company at the age of 30. Now, I won't talk about what I did before because it's not really meaningful for the audience, I think, today. But I started my first company and it wasn't meant to be a travel business at all. It was actually, the idea was to develop a search engine and to be a competitor of Google, right? So
Okay.
that's how ambitious we were.
Well, set the targets high, Jerome. I mean,
you gotta
don't go step by step. Go straight for the top.
Exactly. So, and of course, we kind of didn't reach that target, as you can imagine. I mean, you would know about that, but by now. But we ended up developing a pretty good search engine, and it happened that it was really interesting to use in the field of travel, because the difference with Google is Google, as you know, when you search the internet, when you use Google, you don't search internet, you search Google's index, right? They have a huge database, right? And you cannot do that with travel, right? You cannot store all the prices for planes, for flights from A to B everywhere, every second. So you're gonna have to address this in real time. And thankfully, we developed a real-time search engine. And this real-time search engine started to be really useful, helping online travel agencies in Europe back then, Opodo, Last Minute, to monitor what competitors were doing with pricing. So we developed this kind of B2B solutions of price monitoring. And one day, believe me or not, I decided to put this online. So I created a brand, and so everybody was against this idea of putting this to the public. But I did decide to do it without any reason out. Then it was actually, I thought it was really useful, and it became a huge blast. I mean, and to the point that France Telecom in France, which was at this point the biggest website. I mean, for those who have been there, Wanadu, which became Orange, which is known as Orange right now, decided to acquire this website. So this is where we did our first exit. And then
this is kind of, we wouldn't have called it the same thing back then, but you were doing aggregation and meta search for airfare then. That's really what it sounds like.
We created Skyscanner, I think 1 or 2 years before actually Skyscanner created Skyscanner. So they did a much better job. But we were there.
Do you remember the name of the rail aggregation company they ran before it was Skyscanner? I know they acquired them into Skyscanner. There was some sort of a joint meeting of the minds there. It was called Zumbu or something. It was kind of ancient history of the internet now, but it's way back before Skyscanner.
When you think about, this was like when was that? Early 2000s. Yeah.
Wow.
So
that's going back.
Yeah, in 20
but
years.
You're a startup guy, Jerome, in an airline. I can't think, look, it's not a juxtaposition of terms because in fairness, both airlines and startups deal with wildly disruptive innovation in their own ways, in very different ways on a daily basis themselves. How, working for the three biggest travel companies and being a startup guy, was there peacemaking to keep it all working? Did you find that there was a good cultural fit, or were you kind of used as the dynamo to stir things up a little bit? How was that for you personally?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, so we started our second company after this first little exit. We reinvested everything, and we created a meta search, and we ended up selling this this business which we created in APAC to Travelport. And this is when I joined Travelport. So my first experience in a large organization. And to my surprise, it was actually very, very interesting. I mean, my associate, my partner back then, didn't live this really well. I mean, he was pretty much unable to live in this corporate world, as most startups would do. They would have difficulty to cope with the constraints and the organization and whatever. I actually loved it, and the reason why I loved it is because I was very much focused on doing. When you're a startup, you have to focus your energy to get results, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a very narrow focus, get the things done, right? Kind of situation, and you do it day and night, and no holiday. It goes without saying that you don't have free time. You live, you breathe, you eat your business. And
you find out about a bank holiday the day before the bank holiday. It's not something you plan for anymore.
No. I mean, and so when I joined Travelport, all of a sudden I started opening my mind to different cultures, different people doing like things which I've never heard about before. And it's a multinational organization, and I started talking about finance with finance people, talking about legal aspects of travel with lawyer specialists, etc. And this really opened my mind. And all of a sudden I realized that I spent like more than 10 years running my business and missing all this, very interesting opportunities to collaborate with different horizons, different cultures, different people across the globe. And I loved it. I really loved it. And I also realized that, and sorry for the startups who are online today, but I realized that I met way more interesting people in the corporate world than actually when I was an entrepreneur. And the reason is because, again, it comes because my interest and my interest in people comes because they're different, because they think different, because they act different, because they do different. And that's something which I'm really going after. So to me, it was a great experience. To my partner, to my associate back then, it wasn't. So it's really a personal thing. Coming back to your question, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Like when you think about the day-to-day of a startup, it is to deliver, it is to show something. And anything that stands in the way, you just annihilate it. It's just get the damn thing shipped. It's whatever it takes to get it shipped. And it's different inside a larger organization because you're immediately working with scale. You're not scrapping, 1,000 users into 2,000, into 10,000 and so on. You're starting at 1 million, or you're starting at 20 million. You're starting with huge numbers. And now you're introducing possibly a breaking change or a different type of relationship into existing customers' lives. What was it like for you at that level? I know you were at serious numbers in your own startup before, but what was it like moving from small to big?
You're perfectly right. It was a shock in many, many regards. It was a shock because for me, 1 week was midterm, and a month was long term. And all of a sudden I realized that, 1 week is nothing, and the month is near term. In the corporate world. So this kind of, I had to adjust, and I had to understand that the dynamics are very, very different. But on the flip side, what I brought, I love to think that what I brought to Travelport back then was a sense of urgency and a sense of doing things. You're right saying that nobody would care for a project if it's not like funded with at least a couple of 100,000, if not millions, right? Whereas I was used to do things with any startup would do things with nothing, and so I brought a little bit of this culture I hope inside Travelport. So starting lean, doing things in a quick manner, step by step. You rightly mentioned. That was something which was at the same time a shock and at the same time a positive experience. I couldn't last in the organization for more than 4 years, not because of that, honestly, but because I relocated to London and I couldn't make a living in London. I missed Asia and I relocated to Asia at some point. But I kept on moving with working for large organizations, then consequently Amadeus and Sabre later on. But for the same reason, for the same exact reasons, I I like the challenge of being in a world which I have to adjust to. And today at Singapore Airlines, me being like I look, I don't look at Singaporeans, I don't speak like a Singaporean, I don't think like Singaporeans. So I have to do a huge effort adapting to this culture.
There's a saying among doctors that if you're standing around the emergency department of the hospital, that the last thing you should ever say is it's quiet.
Yeah.
Because it's about something's about to go horribly wrong.
Yes.
Is there the same kind of feeling inside an airline where, everything seems to be running okay? Nobody says that just in case somebody jinxes it. Is there that kind of a feeling that it's always evolving? There's always some, crisis to deal with, or there's always something changing, or there's always a disruption, or there's a volcano going off, or there's something going horribly. Is there always a sense of permanent change inside an airline? Are you constantly dealing with that changing situation then?
No, definitely not. There is no sense of urgency in most airlines, unfortunately. I mean, like, with the exception of those airlines, those low-cost airlines born in the web, right? Which is a different animal, it's a different culture. But in most regular airlines, which have been there for decades, no, this is not really what they deal with. They deal with flying planes, which is extremely complex operations. I mean, I just realized over the last 2 years how complex it is as a business. It's unbelievably complex. It's a combination of an orchestrations of so many things happening, at the same time, that you have to synchronize, making sure that you fly people in a safe manner, that you make them feel good, that you make them feel safe. So it's unbelievably complex. So that's really something I realized. So you gotta have to take your time and make sure that you don't rush, and that you don't become impatient when you're doing things, because you want to make sure that everything is done properly well. Of course, as a with my background coming into that world, I have to learn. And it took me a few months when I joined Singapore Airlines to really understand the dynamics. Although there is no, I would say, literally sense of urgency, it's changing a lot, especially, as you can imagine, since like now a few months, and also since 2018, because in 2018 our CEO, Singapore Airlines CEO, launched the digital innovation program. And when Singaporeans say something culturally, they stand for it. They walk the walk, they talk the talk, but they also walk the walk, right? They don't only talk, like, as we say here. So he was committing to a funding, to setting up a team, which is my team today, and we're really driving this innovation for Singapore. So things are changing. Really, you can see it, you can feel it. And yesterday we had our accelerator program pitch, and I think we had never that many attendees. Hundreds of people attending the webcast. Listening to startups coming and pitching their innovation ideas. Never happened in the company history before. So it means something, I think, to the company. Did I answer your question, Kevin?
You're onto it. I was hoping for some sort of a backstage metaphor. Nobody says Macbeth around an airline, but no, I'll take it. Someday I'm going to get somebody to map out the critical path, the project management expression, all of the key variables that need to line up for a plane to take off on time. You don't get credit for it. But there's 100 things that could go wrong, generally do, that then somebody else catches the ball and keeps running. There's so much that can go wrong there. So that when you bring in something that could be quite disruptive, that's when everybody's guard gets up. It's almost a miracle that that the planes even take off, when you think about all of the obstacles that are there for you. I do want to talk a little bit about the challenges that you guys have laid out. So for just a kind of a shout out, we've got folks already from the UK, Quebec, Melbourne. Welcome, guys.
Wow.
Singapore, of course, and South Africa on. If you are watching us live, do drop us a question here into whatever chat window is closest to you. We're streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, and of course on travelmassive.com, where you can find out all about what Jerome is here to talk to us today about. So get a question in for us at the end, and we'll try and put Jerome on the spot. In the meantime, I'll keep him on his toes. For that project from your CEO, when we were talking about this off camera, off air, sorry, we were talking about how it's created a culture of support for external companies coming into. That's easy to say. And it's been a couple of years that you've put this program into motion. What's it been like in reality? Is it a little bit of, it feels like it could get very puffy and a little bit of press release, but is it actually changing how things are happening internally?
Yes, it is. Because the reason it is changing is not because I'm saying it. It's not because I'm trying to evangelize. It's really because we are tracking everything we do with numbers. SIA is a culture of you cannot bluff. I mean, people don't take your words. They take acts. They take action. It's very much the culture deep down to the DNA of Singapore Airlines. And one of the first thing I had to deal with was what the KPIs would have. We would have to deliver numbers. And the virtue of this is you start tracking pretty much everything. The number of ideas that your staff, that your people start submitting. The number of ideas that you push to becoming a prototype. Then from a prototype, you move on to become a proof of concept, which is actually implemented to a limited scale, but still implemented in a workable solution, all the way to eventually a solution which is fully implemented, right? And in 2 years, what I can share with you, it's numbers, right? We have raised from our people, from our staff, from our employees at Singapore Airlines, more than 1,000 ideas, which we selected something like more than 100. So 10% of those ideas were actually selected to move on to a prototype stage. Out of this prototype stage, 18 became actual solution implemented and working now in the company, in the airline.
Wow.
And helping the cost killing or helping the revenue optimization in a way or another. We would not work on a solution if it doesn't bring a material contribution to the revenue or to the cost savings to the company, or improving the customer service in a tangible and measurable way. So that's very, very important. Everything we do is measured, is tracked.
In terms of your organization, give me a quick picture of your org chart. Do you have internal developers, internal product teams to deliver on digital, or is this still largely outsourced? Or what is the life cycle of those ideas once they go from the post-it note into reality?
That's a very good question. Actually, it's the core. It's the core of the thing, which I think really made this team successful. When I joined, the team was very much set as a development team, a prototyping team. A bunch of nerds who were like mostly focusing on. And I'm a nerd, huh? So it's not. Don't feel it's a criticism in my mouth. I'm coming from this. But when I joined, I realized that it was a problem because I liked the idea that they were like really nerdy and very passionate about technology and innovation, but we couldn't develop things internally because it wasn't scalable. So I really, and that's number one. Number two, I realized that, hey, the horsepower out there, right? Startups, specialists, domain experts, domain knowledge experts everywhere in the world is 1 billion times the horsepower we have internally. So why would we build things internally if they're already built there, available, or maybe very similar, and we could adjust it to make it work within our organization? So we started really shifting the team core skills from being this prototype maker to become actually, to make a liaison between our business people and the external world, and eventually also our internal development capabilities. So my team keeps on managing projects. So they take an idea, they evaluate the idea, they address the feasibility of the idea, which is very important, And then once they think that the idea is feasible at the cost and with in a certain timeline, they're gonna get people connected, or internal business unit people connected with development teams, and we pick the best out there in the world to make sure that they build the best of class solutions for us. So that's something which is really working, and it's not only working, it's actually very exciting. So we have now a connective tissue with more than 100 of startups. Out of them, we probably have a very tight and close relationship with more than 20 of them, 20 teams that we believe are, our selection process, Kevin, let me just tell you that the selection process for a startup to work with us, whether it's through the AppChallenge, which we're going to talk about later, or whether it's through our acceleration program, which Travis, my team member, is coordinating, these programs are extremely tough. The reason they are tough is because we want startups to really deliver a tangible value, to prove that they deliver the promise. And that's a very difficult thing to do. So any startup which will join the AppChallenge or acceleration, so for example, just to give you an example, we had 120 startups applying to our acceleration program this year. 4 of them made it to the finale, and the finale is actually speaking to the CEO. Our CEO is standing front row, listening to every startup, and most of these startups will actually become true partners to the organization. I mean, they will become either a vendor, and eventually, in some exceptional cases, we would invest in them.
Now, Jerome, I wonder, do you guys have a, I don't know, I don't want to call you out on this one, because when you're a startup, there's plenty of communication that's targeted at you, and an app challenge is just might be a great way of spending a weekend or getting a pitch together, sending it in. Sure, why not? And there's hundreds of them, and there's hundreds of extremely high value accelerators as well. That's not really what you're doing, though. This is for you. I got the feeling anyway, and correct me if I'm wrong. For you guys, this is a way of structuring procurement, of structuring that kind of new disruptive stuff coming in, so that yes, you can support the startups while they go through it. Everybody learns on both sides, but at the end of it all, what you're really doing is, or what we all hope, is that there's a startup and an airline that might come closer and sign a contract together. There's an element of that I just can't shake from it, that is completely absent from any other challenge that you might take part in as a startup. This is procurement, right?
Yeah, you're hitting it on the head. Actually, it's more than procurement only. It's you're right. I mean, 3 years ago, you were a startup, Kevin, and you would like to, you sure that you can help Singaporeans with your innovative solution.
Oh, yeah.
You would have to. You would have
the
to
things I tried to do to get a meeting with you guys. No, I mean, it was
number one. If you're lucky enough to get a meeting, you would have to go through not only one meeting. You would have to go through dozens of them with like probably 15, 20, 30, who knows, different people. And you're gonna have to be sponsored by a very top guy, making sure that you get this meeting scheduled, right? And you will have to go through a procurement process, which you rightly mentioned, which is like, imagine an airline procurement process, right? We get to make sure you are safe, that what you develop is secure, and so on and so forth. So this is a never-ending thing. For a startup of 10 or 15 guys, there's no way you're gonna survive this process, right? So what we put in place in very quickly was to be a kind of a proxy. So today, if you come and you reach out to us, you have a framework, you have a programmatic way of engaging with us. You talk to my team, and my team is going to handle this behind the scene. They're going to handle the legal clearance. They're going to handle the security clearance. They're going to handle the procurement process, etc. So for the startup, it's one head only, and a couple of meetings, right? And then it makes it seamless for them. They really can focus on their value, what they really bring to the company. And here's the point, Kevin. If you're a startup and you come into the AppChallenge program or the acceleration program with us, you're gonna sort out a concrete problem. You're gonna help us fixing a problem, fixing a pain points for the business. So there's only 2 solutions. Either you succeed in doing that, or either you fail. There is no midway, right? So that's something that makes it tough. It makes it difficult, but extremely interesting at the same time. So I think those startups who really take the challenge and come with the true desire of learning from us, learning from our business people, solving the business problem, they really succeed. And not necessarily because they have the best technology.
So we have the App Challenge. We do want to talk about that a little bit. Today we're the 7th of July. On the 12th, you have a cutting off date for applications for the App Challenge. And look, it's structured with all the I won't say expected. It's actually a very generous program, and any startup will be mad to pass over it. But it's not just for startups; it's for any company, really, any company that's there. And you lay out 10 challenges. I won't go through them all, but there are 10 things that you guys have structured to say, look, these are the areas that we're most open to or only open to. Everything from handling food and beverage orders on board, sustainability, traveling in the new normal. Where do those come from, and what are you looking for when people address those challenge statements that you call them?
Yeah, So yeah, my team is as I said earlier, my team is the liaison. They are connecting people, right? So we are sourcing those challenges right with it inside the business units. We're gonna meet with the business people, talk to them. It's a virtuous cycle. The more they know us, the more we know them, the more this dialogue, kicks in, and the more they're gonna share about their real pain points, and they're gonna believe that by mobilizing resources, the horsepower out there, we can maybe do things cheaper, faster, and better for them, right? So that's the problematic when you set up like challenges like that. You want to be concrete enough to drive, to mobilize an energy which is focused, but you don't want to kill potential ideas which are maybe completely different, right? So it's a balance. If you look at the problem statements, you will have some problem statements which are pretty much focus driven, some of them which might look a bit more loose, but this is with the intention of keeping the right balance between those startups who feel more comfortable. When I'm saying startups, any innovator actually out there, you're right. Anyone who believes that he can or she can really contribute to solving those problems. Some of them feel much better when they read at a very concrete, problem to solve, and they cope with that naturally, easily. Some others, they need a broader spectrum, so something which is more like, loose, in order for them to be more creative and bring more of their creativity into the idea which they're gonna pitch. But all of them gonna have the same opportunity to come and pitch in front of our CEO again. So that's a very unique program in that way. I don't know of many companies which are actually bringing startups to pitch directly in front of the CEO and the leadership team. And sorry, Kevin, yeah, please go ahead.
No, I'm going to frame it another way, Jerome. I mean, you've been 2 years at Singapore now. And you're a charismatic guy. You speak publicly. You do the road shows and everything. So I'm assuming people recognize you. How safe is it for you to walk through the baggage hall or the check-in area or around any of the frontline staff without hearing people come to you with an idea or a problem to solve or something else? I mean, is it safe for you to work at Singapore at the moment without getting pitched, please solve this X for me, please?
I wish, I can tell you a little anecdote, a little story. My last trip to France was, of course, with Singapore Airlines, as you can imagine. So I walked into the plane, sat down in the plane, and one of the crew approached me like they approach any passenger, and she asked me, whether I want this. And I usually what I do is I let them know. I guess they know, but I let them know that I'm an employee, so that they don't stress too much, and they pay more attention to the real customers. And she asked me naturally, so who are you actually? In which department are you working? And she said, I'm working for Chris Lab, for the Innovation Lab. And she said, oh, now I see you. Now I have you with me. I submitted an idea 2 weeks ago. I still didn't get an answer. And so we spent the next 15 minutes talking about that. But this was this would be my dream. I dream about a situation where, as you said, every time I walk into a plane or every time I walk, in front of ground staff, they will reach out to me and they will tell me, hey, what's going on with my idea? I want this to become a real solution. This is really what I like. And at some point, I hope
what we have here, just for if you're watching on screen, we have the actual application page for the airline AppChallenge and all of the broad areas for those problem statements. Do these come from those staff, from the burning, screaming questions? Have you filtered it down to those, or are some of them nice to haves, Jerome, or do they come from the pain of running the airline on a daily basis?
Yeah, they definitely come from the pain of running an airline on a daily basis. Absolutely. I mean, there is nothing we don't do innovation for the sake of doing innovation. We do innovation for in order to solve concrete problems, and that's the reason why I think the team ends up becoming popular and very legitimate in the organization 2 years after we started. And in many occasions, I've seen this in my previous experiences when corporate organizations set up a lab. They give them, sometimes intentionally, a green card, just go out there, find out whatever you think makes sense, which has a virtue, which is indeed very interesting, to explore the world and try to come with things that we would have never thought about. The problem doing so is that you're creating a team of people building things in an ivory tower in a way, right? They get disconnected from the business, and everybody across the organization gets like disconnected from them, if not jealous, but because they have this like funky gadgets, they play with all sorts of things, and they are exposed to communications platforms like me today. Whereas what we decided to do is to do the other way. It intentionally maybe limiting the exploration, side of innovation, but really trying to do it in an organic way. By organic, I mean get our people to submit problems to us and mobilize the energy to get this problem solved. And the satisfaction from our people or staff is that when they see their problem, let me just tell this, it's very important for people here in the audience to understand what we're doing. When you are a cabin crew, like the cabin crew I just mentioned, her name is Noelle. So when Noelle approached me with this idea, when Noelle submits an idea, Noelle is not going to wait for 6 months for this idea to become a solution. Noelle will actually become the person who is going to prototype the solution and eventually get it implemented. So all staff, all people, when they submit an idea, if this idea is actually selected, they go to the journey of becoming an intrapreneur. They actually build the solution all the way. We help them. You might think, this is crazy because they are not programmers. How can they actually go through building a digital solution, right? But everybody can sing. I'm sure everybody can sing, and not everybody is a musician. So it's the same thing. We do the music behind. We take care of all the things which we need to do to make the solution happen. But the staff who goes through this process doesn't have to know this heavy lifting and this coding skills. They will learn about the lean startup methodology, and they will get to connect with startups in order to build those solutions together.
So what you're bringing to the table, Jerome, is a way of translating those tough KPIs from inside the organization, as well as the knowledge to how to navigate different parts of the organization that most companies may not be aware of, like legal, like compliance, like all of the. It's a list. It's long. You're also bringing speed to it as well. Do you have any stories from previous cohorts of this that have gone through, the different parts of it, the application, the pitching, the CEO front row story, but through to actual contract with you? Have any stories you'd like to share about those guys? What have they done properly?
You mean external party startups or partners? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think when we started this 2 years ago, it would take us from, try to be honest here, 8 to 10 months, if not more, to get from an idea which can be like a staff idea, which 2 lines on a piece of paper, to an actual solution implemented and working. And this was already pretty quick. We're talking about a world, and the airlines usually take average 2 to 3 years from an idea to actually implement the solution because of all these constraints we were talking about. So we managed to accelerate this pretty significantly by doing the proxy I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. Right now, I just checked because we had a presentation yesterday. I checked the figures, and our more recent projects, from an idea to an actually implemented solution, takes less than 6 months. And this is pretty impressive for an airline. And if
that's not normal. No,
it is not normal.
It's supposed to. Well, it can take years. It can take a long time to get from hello to implementation. But were there cases of what I'm really trying to get to, Jerome, is what did those companies do right that we should recommend to anybody watching today to do as well? What is the right approach to use when applying to the program?
Yeah, I can tell you maybe a little story again. Story maybe help to understand better what I'm trying to articulate with my limited English, Franglish. I remember one day this startup, which was already a pretty established startup, which came into our office, and they came and presented a solution they could build for us, right? And starting from a pain point that we shared with them. What surprised me is that they went through like a 40-minute presentation. No, there was not even their logo on their deck. The deck was all about Singapore Airlines, the problem, how they walk to the problem, the creative thinking they walk to the problem, the way they would work with us together, and the names of the people they actually wanted to get involved to do that, right? And so I asked the presenters, I cooked him at the end of the presentation. I said, I've never seen that before. You didn't even talk about your company. You didn't even did this kind of commercial pitch, right, that we usually see. And he said, no, why would I had do that? Because you know us, you ask us to come. I take it as a fact that you already convinced that we might be able to solve the problem for you, right? And that was very, very, very impressive, because most of the time what we see is, and I've been there, I've been a startup, and I know exactly what I'm talking about. When you have an opportunity to pitch, whether it's an investor, whether it's a corporate acquisition, it's all about me, myself, and I. We have the greatest technology. We have the greatest artificial intelligence system. Nobody has that. We have the greatest board. Our investors are unbelievable, and so on and so forth, right? You spend a lot of energy and time talking about you and and your technology and your company, etc. And that doesn't really help. What you have to show as a startup walking into a large organization, you have to show empathy. You have to show that you're really, really willing to empathize and to connect with the people, connect with me, connect with my colleagues. What's your problem? Tell me about your problem. Why is it a pain point for you? How much of a pain is it? And the more you do that as a startup, the more you create this connection, the higher the chance you're going to actually be selected. And our AppChallenge or acceleration program are nothing else than, in fact, to be honest, sometimes we care for the innovation and the technology, of course, of the startup and their talent. You need two things. You need talent and motivation. But motivation is 80% of it. Talent, we can...
Motivation gets you perseverance. It gets you tolerance. Exactly. It gets you maybe an extra chance. Jerome, I have a growing list of questions here. Our viewers from around the world have been quite active. I have one from Alex Brainbridge, which I am dying to put to you, but I'm going to get to it in just a second. I want to ask about you and your team, Travis and the other guys that are working with you on this. Now, you've been through a couple of these programs, you've gone through the lists a couple of times, you've seen all of the different applications. What are the traps people fall into? So empathy and the story afterwards, I get it. I think you made the point well, but what are the first stumbling blocks that people are hitting when applying to you? What should they just change up front before they even hit send? What is the 2 or 3 tips, if you could, that have come from the frustrations from yourself, Travis, and the guys going through all of the applications in the past?
Yeah, so maybe I can put it that way. What you guys should avoid when you're applying to the challenge or to the acceleration program, don't send us your pitch deck. Don't send us your investor deck. Because we couldn't care less. What we care for is really the quality of the deck, to be honest. The glossy aspect of the deck, we don't care. I remember, it was our AppChallenge last year or the year before. We had a group of young people applying. They presented themselves as a startup. They were not even a startup. They were just a bunch of guys who came together and had an idea and bond together to actually come to us with a solution, right? And a very innovative solution, actually. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for people who show that they put some brain juice in understanding what the hell we're trying to solve, and come with like a very simple and straightforward way of addressing this for us. We are not asking for a final solution. We are not asking for not even a prototype. We're asking for a path to go from the problem to an actual eventual solution. And that's something which I can tell you that our leaders, right? Our leaders when they attend to those presentations, that's what they care for. They care for people who come with a sense of empathy, humility. Singapore Airlines leader don't cope well with, there is a culture that's going to be maybe useful for startups coming from overseas. When I was working for US companies, if you walk into the room, you walk on stage, you have to show off. You have to show that you're the best. You have to deliver your background, your CV. Let me tell you, let me show you, I've done this before, I can do this again, right? In Asia, this is not the way it works. In Asia, it's all about, I think I have something which could be interesting for you. I think I understand your problem. Let me try to show you how I can sort it out for you. It's a totally different way. If you come and show off, you will actually get people locked down. they will mentally be locked and they won't even listen to you. So that's something very important also for startups to understand.
So the recipe is as important as the final result, as the cake. You know, you need
The
to be
recipe
able to see how it
and
works.
the attitude. And the attitude, yes. The attitude is very, very important. Yeah.
Okay, it's interesting.
I hope that helps.
No, it does. I've a growing list of questions, and I have a little back channel here heating up on me if I don't get some of them to you, Jerome. But I know I'll spring off into a couple of my own before we get to the end. The one from Alex Bainbridge was, I'll paraphrase Alex, I know you don't mind. Alex Bainbridge is the founder of Otura, based over in Oxford there. He's building self-driving cars, but if you know him, he's one of the early pioneers in tour and activities booking technology, with all kinds of crazy statistics on that, and a regular visitor to Travel Massive for sharing his story and his own entrepreneurship story. Why Singapore? You know, if I think about something you said at the beginning, just to relate it back to you, you have to stay razor focused. You know, it's about shipping, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, we need to get either the CMO or the CEO or the whole leadership team aside just to work on this pitch to get it right for you guys, because the door is open. You have to get the pitch right. Why Singapore and why not somebody else? What makes you guys stand out on this one?
Yeah, look.
I know he's asking with love, so
if I haven't convinced you so far, what can I say? What can I say more? Look, I mean, you those who flew with Singapore Airlines, they know what I'm talking about, right? Those who know. The reason, I mean, I had no intention to work for another company. You know, when I left Sabre, after I left Sabre, my intention was to get retired and to go on a van trip, to be honest with you, for a few years. And when Singapore Airlines, when I got this call, I was like, I have to do it. I have to join this company, because I flew Singapore Airlines for more than 10 years. And I've been amazed by the quality of the service, the smile, the care of the crew, the notion of excellence. When you think about the complexity of operations running behind the scene, and you see like the smooth and gentle, ballet of those crews, like walking around and serving you, you don't even notice them, right? Unless you really need them. And that's something really exceptional. And only a handful of airlines really manage to do this really well. And I think Singapore Airlines is probably one of the best in the world. I'm not saying this because we're working for them now. I already told that before. And I've flew many airlines, including Asian airlines. So I think that Singapore Airlines as a brand is very much comparable to maybe Apple or maybe Club Med, for those who are French. There is an emotional connection to the brand. I mean, actually, I connected emotionally to the brand, right? So in other words, it makes it more meaningful for me to work for this corporate organization. And I think for startups or for innovators out there, knowing that you're contributing to such a brand in itself is already very valuable, right? And of course, because what comes behind, in order to what made Singapore Airlines what it is today is its people. And you're going to deal with people who have a level of rigor, excellence, and discipline that honestly I've seen nowhere else. In what they do, they are really the best at doing it. Right? So if you really want to experience something which is best of class when it comes to the airline industry or any other industrial experience, building a solution, Singapore Airlines is the right place. And we have the team to help you doing so.
Are you guys... Look, we're still kind of locked down. We're in lockdown plus here in Dublin. It's strange. I've seen people in a very weird way go to pubs now, and it's not like it used to. So it's changed. Everything has changed. How has life changed for you guys in the wider lab organization there as a result of COVID? And have your priorities changed? Are you focused more on that this year than before?
We've never been so busy, Kevin. I mean, we don't have planes in the sky, but I think what happened is, of course, after the shock, after the acceleration happened, and the first thing our CEO and our leadership did, the first thing they did was care for their people. So they wanted to make sure everybody is busy, or crews or pilots and all our operation staff. We mobilize them to think positively, to move on, instead of looking at how many people are we going to lay off this month to balance the sheets, right? That's not what they had in mind. So what we did with the team, we launched enterprise-wide community engagement, where we mobilized everybody, literally 20,000 people across the globe, to come and participate to how can I help the company, how can I help the community overcoming this challenge, number one, and how can I help the company emerging stronger. And this community engagement is still going on, and it's an online engagement. So the shift from a very much offline company, which is all about intuitive personal, relationship, connecting people, the shift from physical connections to online connections for Singaporeans was extremely tough. Because, in Asia and in Singaporeans, the way you get things moving on is by building connections with people, by working together, and by getting to know them, which is extremely difficult to do online. But the fact that we decided to choose this community engagement path kind of helped moving from, oh my God, we're moving from an offline world where we did everything pretty much face-to-face to now a way of doing everything like on WebEx, or we don't even know how to operate. So we brought this platform in order to help people really joining a community and feeling part of a group and doing something together. Okay, and this is becoming very successful in the company. So it's just an example where digital, I'm not all about digital, even though I'm in charge of digital, but I think this is where we see digital as very valuable to help organizations and people like overcoming the limitations that will have to.
I think to use digital, you need to understand the people first. You can't just roll in with apps and hope to fit them around people. You need to understand what the domain is first. It sounds like you're doing an awful lot of coordinating as a result, Jerome. I did want to touch on that with you. Digital used to mean let's get a mobile app and a website for booking, and then let's add ticketing. It is changing. And there is an expectation among passengers that it would be the entire touch point with airline, apart from the seat and the crew, maybe the aircraft, of course. But what does digital mean for you today? And is it changing?
Okay, answering this question, I'll be very honest. And I'm not the spokesman for SIA saying this, right? But this is very much my personal belief. And I hope my team pretty much align with me on that. We have a risk. We are running into a risk right now. And the risk has two sides when it comes to digital. One risk is the risk of dehumanizing, our relationship with our passengers, with our customers. By putting everything electronically, by keeping them away from having human interaction, it's going to defeat the purpose of the excellent service that we know from Singaporeans, right? So I could develop that, but let's leave it on the side for now. If you have more questions, I'm happy to answer this one. The other risk, which I see really coming up, at least I live it as a potential risk, is what I'm calling digital fatigue. Necessarily we spend our days now on mobile, on laptops, that's pretty much what we do, even more than we did before. To a point that there's this kind of counterproductive effect, the cognitive load of dealing with all this cold interface systems that we use to communicate with each other is something that maybe it's my culture, maybe it's because I'm French, maybe it's more on the Latin side of the culture, but I feel that it's maybe less of a problem in Asia, but I feel that there is a risk as well here. So as leading the digital innovation plan for Singapore Airlines, I want to make sure that we don't overdo. I want to make sure that digital doesn't become a substitute of service excellence and of collaboration tools. So I haven't got to the answers of and how we can limit that. I mean, I don't have the answers. It's something which really keeps me awake at night, and not to mention the risk of becoming intrusive in people's life. Not to mention the risk of what's going to happen with all this data that people, think about today. What changed literally in Singapore, for example. Whenever you walk in a mall, whenever you walk in a shop, you literally share your personal information, who you are, where you. So what's going to happen with this data? We don't really know. I mean, we trust the authorities that they're going to make a good use of this data, but there are things here that have accelerated so much that we need to step down from the bicycle and look at the way we're riding the bicycle a little bit to make sure that we are not overplaying that. And that's coming from me. It's a bit surprising, because that should be all about digital. But I think it's I have to say it because I think it's from a deep inside, it's something I feel as a risk.
I have one tough question and a couple of rapid fire questions I think left for you. We'll maybe cover the quick ones first, short answers if possible. Who owns the ideas when they submit them to you, and do you sign an NDA around it, Jerome? What's the process on that?
The employee who submits the idea owns the idea all the way through. But he's an employee of Singapore Airlines, so the idea belongs to Singapore Airlines. But the paternity of the idea will always belong to the idea submitter.
Do startups need to be applying from Asia? Is that a requirement, or is it open to me here in Dublin as well?
Absolutely not. I mean, we have startups from everywhere in the world. We had like 73 different countries applying to our AppChallenge last year. I guess we're gonna have something similar this year. No, it's definitely open to anyone.
I've got some deep probing questions about the airline industry in general coming through to me here, but one that was interesting from Dave Lorch in London here. And I'm going to touch on NDC as well around this, Jerome. So take this question where you like. We have trends towards NDC. We've got trends towards, zeroing commissions to traditional, brick and mortar channels, if I could call it that. Are you shutting the door to distribution-based ideas or sales-based ideas when there's no commission to share anymore? Do airlines need startups as much as startups need airlines in that respect? Are you only open to innovation that is non-sales related?
No, we are definitely open to innovation in helping us with operations, helping us with sales and increasing revenue, and more importantly, new businesses. So I'm not the spokesman again for Singapore Airlines. I'm not the VP or SVP for commercial and marketing. But what I can tell you is my role and the role of my team is to be open to disruption. We'll never close the door to someone who comes with an idea of distributing without intermediaries, or an idea of something disruptive in managing the way we serve customers. We'll always be very open. In the end, we won't make the choice. We won't make the final decision whether we go for this route or not. It's still going to be our business unit. But we have many cases where we think it's worth trying. And talking about NDC, talking about ancillaries, talking about new ways of selling or tickets, of course, but also new ways of selling and going beyond flight, because we're looking at, how can we, without disclosing any secret here, but we are very actively looking at business beyond flight. If they make sense for our customers, it always has to be something valuable and meaningful for our customers in line with our brand value proposition. In other words, we won't go with, a cheap, low-cost service, which is not in line with, what Singapore Airlines represents as a brand. So, but beside that, we're not limiting any sorts of innovative ideas.
Is NDC getting a huge amount of traction with you guys? It feels, when I talk to airline guys privately, at least, they usually tell me it feels like homework. Everybody has to do it. Is it core to the future for you guys, or is it just another output channel for sales at this stage? And maybe I'm asking you to disclose too much there, Jerome. You can answer that which way you like.
No, you're not. I mean, I feel very comfortable. I'm coming from the GDS industry. I've been there before. Now I'm with the airlines. So I've been in the dark side of the industry. Just a private joke here for my ex-colleagues. No, I think I believe, knowing the GDS inside out, I understand why they bring on the table. I understand what they bring on the table and the value they represent for airlines, and they represent a huge value still. You have to understand that these systems, if you take Amadeus or Sabre, the level of transaction, the volume of transaction, the resilience of those systems is beyond understanding. I mean, it's comparable, if not even above what Amazon is pouring today in terms of speed of transactions, security of transactions, and so on and so forth. So we are talking about serious players out there. So the idea is not to think that we can replace them overnight, but we really work actively with them to help them and them help us to modernize the way we distribute. If there are intermediaries in the value chain which don't really bring value because they just take a part of the gain with not bringing much value, they're gonna have to go. But that's history, and it's just gonna take more or less time. But to the question whether I wish it could go faster, yes, I think airlines could move faster, and whether from a speed to execution, NDC didn't deliver the promise it was supposed to promise. Yes, I would agree, but inevitably we're gonna go there. It's gonna take 10 years instead of 5, but it's gonna go there.
But it feels like we brought in NDC and now we have to change all of the furniture to match the new rug, if you know what I mean. So it's kind of like the whole infrastructure needs to change, and that's a good thing because it hasn't really been touched since the 70s and EDIFAC and all that kind of old stuff. It feels.
Yeah, you're opening another topic. We could spend the night on this one.
I know we could go. I could go 2 hours on this. Yeah. One question from Ian, the founder of Travel Massive here, and it's something that we saw a huge amount of buzz around. And look, being a geek about this, I get the benefits of it, but some of the promises were wild. Let's just say it's like, let's implement blockchain and it will solve all of our problems. Well, why don't we just solve all of our problems and use whatever damn database we like? Has it stuck for you guys, or has there been any conversations recently about blockchain at all inside SIA?
Yeah, I told you earlier, I'm a nerd, and I remember when blockchain started popping up. I think I was one of the very early guys popping into Ethereum and trying to and start coding my own little Ethereum app. This was way before I joined SIA. And now I have to come to the observation that what makes a blockchain project difficult is actually not the technical feasibility. Thinking about blockchain as an ecosystem, like as a platform where as a table where you're gonna have to get people to sit on and agree. The problem is not the table. The problem is to get people to sit down and agree. Yeah. And that's why blockchain projects take forever. It's not because of limitations. Of course, blockchain technologies have limitations in terms of scalability, and we could talk about that. We could address them, but they would be addressed, at some point. But I think the real difficulty with blockchain projects, in most of the cases I've been participating to, is that the framework, the collaborative spirit doesn't happen, and the governance you need in order to decide, that everybody's gonna bring his data, everybody's gonna take his share, bring his share, take a little bit of the pain together, and play the game of becoming an agnostic, universal platform rather than a proprietary solution. That's tough. It's extremely difficult for organizations to overcome that psychologically. And especially for industries which have been there for decades, which are used to have their own proprietary systems and don't like to share data, don't like to open up their legacy to third parties for sometimes valuable reasons. So I think that's the problem with blockchain today, and the culture aspect is the most challenging.
2 more quick questions before we wrap up. So thanks everybody for joining us. There's time for one or two quick questions here. I've had a question back from Brian Marinan, who runs an accelerator here in Ireland, about IP, just to make sure I heard correctly, because maybe I didn't ask it properly. When it comes to a startup submitting an idea to you guys, they own it, or is there kind of a co-creation where you both kind of own it? Who owns the idea that's submitted to you? Just a quick black and white answer, if you could, on that, please.
It's on a case-by-case basis, Kevin. I think if they bring their background, we won't ask for ownership of their background technology, right? Their background IP. They have an existing assets. They have an existing stack. We have nothing to do with that, right? When it comes to foreground IP, when it comes to the idea we bring into the collaboration to solve the business problem, Of course, there we're going to have co-ownership or exclusive ownership of this. But that goes without saying. It's just the normal way of things.
When you guys do something, it's yours, and when the startups do something, it's theirs, and when there's collaboration, it's kind of to be decided, if I could summarize it.
To put it simply, yes, it's a bit, around those lines with some specific cases, yes.
Yeah. One or two quick more ones. So something that we saw from Travel Scrum recently, the initiative from Jean Quinn, Florian and Sean there's a lot going on around, rebooting travel and everything else. And there's a lot of angst from passengers around uncertainty. We saw even, there's actually a couple of APIs. I know the guys at Sherpa put one together very, very professionally, very, very quickly around how can I fly somewhere and what happens when I fly somewhere. Is there a little bit of angst on an airline level as well among airlines trying to figure out, well, how do we communicate, yes, it's okay to fly? The coordination around COVID and travel seems to be pretty poor, even locally here in Ireland. We don't know whether or not we can. Is that holding us back as an industry, do you think?
As we take this very seriously. I mean, as one important airline, we are, as we speak, we are already implementing solutions to help our customers dealing with complexity of the situation, the versatility of the situation. The situation is very fluid, and that's something we really need to address. So we are implementing solutions that we're gonna offer to customers when they book a flight, or an assistance that we can bring to them in the next coming weeks. So that's really, really ongoing now, very quickly. But we also want to go beyond that. So we are, and not later than yesterday, we had one of the actual group of startups coming up with a solution which we believe is extremely innovative and goes above and beyond just informing people, but really assisting them and preventing them from being in a difficult situation. So I cannot disclose more about that, but that's an extremely important aspect of our work right now.
One last question here, and I'll wrap up from Alberto. So when you're delivering projects, look, whether it's digital or something else, it might be a process-based innovation. It might be just a great business idea. What are the metrics you guys are using? Because, from our perspective, when we're talking about ancillary products, it's conversion or die. That's the only number that matters. Either you're converting, well, maybe you get complaints, I don't know, but you got conversions or zero. That's the only KPI that really matters. And are you delivering the numbers and the marketing fees or whatever to the airline in the background? What are the KPIs you're applying coming in? If you want to talk about one or two of the problem statements, feel free. But what are the KPIs we should be focusing on in this? Is it just conversion? Is it just bottom line revenue? Or is it something else? Is there something else to hope for there?
Yeah, it depends on the projects, right? When it's operations, when it's like supporting operations, it's slightly different, right? It's a case by case thing. When it comes to consumer services and consumer products, which I guess is what you're asking for, so I agree with you. One very important and something that many startups forget to do is to instrument their solution, to make sure that their solution is designed by design, helps them understanding how their product or service is actually adopted. Conversion is one aspect, but you shouldn't be obsessed with conversion. I think what you should be obsessed with is adoption. Whether if your service is really meaningful, if your solution is really meaningful to customers, are they really adopting it, reusing it, and do you have retention? Conversion would come later stage, consequently, right? Consequently, but I think what I really insist on, and having been there and having the age I have, is I know by experience that if you don't instrument the solution you're building by design very early, knowing that this is what you're going to have to go after in terms of KPIs, if you do it later stage, it's very often too late. So it's a very good question. So it takes a bit of time. It takes a bit of sitting down and thinking about what exactly we're going after in terms of value drivers for the customers. But once those are defined, let's make sure the solution is designed in the right way.
Now, Jerome, just before we wrap up, and I know we've gone slightly over the hour, when it comes time to pitch, what is the number one thing? As an expatriate or a first-generation Singaporean, whichever way you want to think of yourself, what is the number one thing you think a startup should do when they visit Singapore, when they have a little bit of downtime?
Number one, take some time before and after so that you can enjoy the city and you can enjoy time with us. What really matters to us is building. I mean, my team is absolutely fantastic in babysitting startups. Don't want to be pejorative here, but really caring for them. The same way a crew will care for you when you're flying with Singaporeans. This is part of our DNA. My team will care for people who are helping us with innovation. We need to build connections. So if you come and join us, what we care for is people who really want to connect with us. Because at the end of the day, if we connect, if there is a fit, if there is a will and a desire to do things together, that's the most important thing. If you have someone who has a fantastic technology, who is a diva, and as a rocket science, engineering solution, but is someone we cannot work with, we're gonna drop it. We're just gonna drop it, because what we want is to enjoy the journey, and we enjoy the human connection with those people who are like really helping us with those challenges. So connect with us. Make sure you take time before and after. And when you have the opportunity to talk to our leaders, to our CEO and the leadership team, make sure you come with with the right words and show your empathy and show that you actually know where you are and who you are talking to.
Well, we ended on a bit of good advice there, Jerome. I appreciate that. We've gone over time, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. I will talk to you for another 2 hours if there wasn't a producer screaming at me.
Me
off
too.
mic.
Me too. I really enjoyed it.
Scream, don't worry.
But
I do have to wrap there. Jerome, thank you so much for joining us today. To find out more about the Singapore Airlines App Challenge and the other initiatives, head on over to travelmassive.com. We will link off to all of the relevant links. You have until the 12th of July at about midnight Singapore time to submit your idea to the challenge. So head on over to travelmassive.com for this. If you found this interesting, please share it with a friend. We'll have a replay available on travelmassive.com as well as on YouTube and all of the fashionable social channels afterwards. But for now, thank you for being part of something massive.